In 1994, Terry and Gwen Sherman found their piece of the American dream. 512 acres of quiet solitude in Utah's Uinta Basin. It was a sanctuary, a place to raise their family and their cattle, far from the noise of the modern world. But the land was not empty. It held a secret, an ancient, unseen presence that had been waiting, and it did not welcome them. The Shermans were a family under siege, not by anything human, but by the impossible. Their story would become one of the most chilling and thoroughly documented paranormal cases of our time. In 1994, a 512-acre property in the Uinta Basin of northeastern Utah was acquired by Terry and Gwen Sherman. Their stated intention was to utilize the land for a commercial cattle ranching enterprise and to establish a family residence. The acquisition marked the beginning of a 2-year period that would become the subject of intense paranormal investigation and media attention. The ranch had been unoccupied for approximately 7 years prior to its purchase by the Shermans. Upon taking possession of the residence, they observed what they considered to be unusual security measures left by the previous inhabitants. These included a series of heavy deadbolt locks on numerous doors and windows, both internal and external. Further investigation of the grounds revealed iron stakes at opposing ends of the property. The property's location is of significant geographical and cultural note. It shares a border with the Uinta and Ouray Indian Reservation, the sovereign territory of the Ute tribe. The region is the subject of local folklore concerning supernatural entities. Specifically, there are long-standing stories referring to a path of the Skinwalker in the vicinity of the ranch. The term Skinwalker derives from Navajo tradition and describes a shape-shifting witch. Its presence within Ute folklore is often attributed by locals to a historic conflict between the two tribes. For the Shermans, these accounts were initially considered local curiosities. However, their own reports of anomalous phenomena began on the first day they moved onto the property, initiating a sequence of events that would continue to haunt them. The stories of the land did not wait long to manifest. On that very first day, as the Shermans unloaded their belongings, they were approached by a creature. It was a wolf, or something that resembled a wolf. It was enormous, far larger than any native species. The animal calmly walked over to a calf and without fear seized it by the snout. Terry Sherman, an experienced rancher, did not hesitate. He fired a high-powered rifle at the creature. The bullet struck home, yet the beast did not flinch. He fired again and again. The animal released the calf, stared directly at Sherman, and showed no sign of injury, no trace of blood. It was impervious to lead. Sherman retrieved a more powerful rifle and pursued the creature, following its tracks. For nearly a mile, the tracks cut a clear path through the mud and brush. And then, in the middle of an open field, they simply vanished. As if the 80-pound animal had been plucked from the earth and had dissolved into thin air. This was only the beginning. As darkness fell, the threat moved from the ground to the sky. The Shermans began to witness unidentified aerial phenomena on an almost nightly basis. These were not just distant lights. They were structured objects. Orbs of light, described as having the intensity of a headlamp, would patrol the property, performing impossible aerial maneuvers. They moved with a silent, cosmic intelligence. The objects grew more defined. From a refrigerator-sized craft exiting an orange portal to a silent, colossal triangle that floated overhead, blotting out the stars. The sky itself had become enemy territory. But the phenomena were no longer confined to the pastures and the skies. They were moving indoors. The walls of the Sherman's home offered no protection. Objects would vanish for weeks, only to reappear in impossible places. Groceries would be inexplicably moved and rearranged in the pantry. Then came the sounds. The family began hearing voices speaking in a low, guttural language they could not identify. Heavy machinery seemed to operate from deep underground, its vibration shaking the very foundation of the house. These were not the creaks and groans of an old home. This was a targeted psychological intrusion. Soon, the intruders were no longer invisible. The Shermans reported seeing shadowy figures moving down the hallways. Tall, dark silhouettes of men that would vanish when confronted. The feeling of being constantly watched became an oppressive, waking reality. But the most disturbing events were happening in the fields. The Shermans' prized cattle, the foundation of their business, were being systematically and bizarrely mutilated. This was not the work of common predators. One animal had its eyeball surgically removed from its socket. Another had a perfect 6-inch hole cored directly through its rectum and into its body cavity. The cuts were made with what investigators would later describe as high-tech surgical precision. And most unsettling of all, there was never any blood. Not on the animal, and not on the ground around it. In one instance, 3 of their best cows, which had been seen just moments before, vanished without a trace. An extensive search of the 512-acre property revealed nothing. No tracks, no broken fences. It was as if they, like the wolf, had simply dissolved into thin air. The family was not just being haunted. They felt they were being studied by a force that was clinical, intelligent, and utterly inhuman. For 2 years, the Sherman family endured the unthinkable. But when the shadowy figures began appearing near their children's rooms at night, the psychological siege became unbearable. The constant torment, the nightly terrors, and the complete loss of safety had exacted their toll. The dream was dead. In 1996, faced with a force that could not be fought, the Shermans made the only decision they had left: to abandon their home and escape the property, whatever the cost. The question remained: who would buy a property plagued by such forces? The answer was Robert Bigelow, a Las Vegas millionaire and paranormal researcher. In 1996, Bigelow purchased the ranch and established the National Institute for Discovery Science. He assembled a team of scientists to transform the family's home into a high-tech laboratory, turning the Shermans' private horror into the world's most infamous paranormal case. With the Sherman family gone, a new era began at the ranch. Not of survival, but of science. For the next decade, Robert Bigelow's NIDS team, armed with state-of-the-art equipment, would document their own catalog of the impossible. The NIDS team documented intelligent orbs, frequent equipment failures, and mysterious cattle deaths. As the ranch's reputation grew, so did unverified stories. One of the most persistent of these tales describes a scientist's alleged encounter with a large humanoid creature emerging from a portal in the air. Despite years of rigorous round-the-clock study, the NIDS team was unable to produce a definitive answer. The phenomenon seemed to be intelligent, almost precognitive, anticipating their experiments and avoiding capture. It left them with a mountain of incredible data, but no conclusions. Was it extraterrestrial? Interdimensional? A product of top-secret government testing? Or was it something far older? An ancient consciousness bound to the land itself? The ranch has since changed hands again, and the investigation continues. Yet the core mystery from the Sherman family's ordeal remains unsolved. They found a place where the veil between our world and the impossible is terrifyingly thin. A chilling reminder that some corners of our map still defy the rules of reality.